What's going on, guys? Alpha the Wizard back at it with another video. Today we're going to be continuing the meta history of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I would like to welcome you to Perfect Circle format. This format takes place in September ban list of 2007 and it lasts until March. And this is right before Dark Arm Return format takes place, so you kind of get to see how fun this format was before all the new broken stuff got released, and this was one of the most balanced formats in Yu-Gi-Oh's history and one of the most skillful. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right into the list. Now this is a relatively standard list of Perfect Circle Monarchs, but most people played a lot of these same cards, so we'll go ahead and just start with the bosses. We do have Ryza. Ryza was always played as a 3 of, because Ryza was the most broken one out of all of them, especially this format. Ryza was able to just spin any card, and with it being predominantly a set pass format, and there was a lot of burn in the format, Ryza was just really good at dealing with a lot of those problems. In addition to Ryza, we also have to play to Zaborg the Thunder Monarch. Now Zaborg was really good this format as well because we are maximizing on Treeborn Frog. So Treeborn Frog is just essentially allowing us to just free tribute over anything and just pop a face down monster, which might be a Fearmonger or a Mystic Tomato. This format definitely gravitated in that direction, and I will say this is a pretty standard list. So most decks around this time, there's going to be a lot of mirror matches, and they're all going to be very close to this list. And then also, in addition to Zaborg, for the tributes, we also played Jinzo. Jinzo just keeps getting better and better as time goes on, and with this being such a trap-heavy format, if you will, because, you know, you're playing a lot of chainable traps in the mirror match, like maybe Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, so that you can get your Treeborn in the standby phase. However, Jinzo is going to lock the traps even more so than ever, because most people are playing Perfect Circle Monarch this format, and locking their spells and traps from, or traps specifically, from being able to activate cuts off their Treeborn Frog. So Jinzo is just a power play this format. But also, in addition to that, we do play 2 Cyber Dragon. Now, Cyber Dragon is just good, just in history. It serves its purpose of just being a big body, just being able to beat over like Gravekeeper Spy, and just naturally hard for the opponent to deal with the smaller monster. So yeah, Cyber Dragon is pretty mandatory this format. I definitely wouldn't play more than 2 though, just because we are playing Treeborn Frog, so it can conflict. Now for the Destiny heroes, we have to start with the best one of them all, and that's Elemental Hero Stratos. Stratos was a key component to this deck. Destiny Hero Malicious did go to 2 for this format, and it basically just balanced everything out, to be quite honest. It didn't make the Destiny Hero engine bad whatsoever. If anything, it was used more skillfully. One might summon Malicious on their turn, and then normal summon Stratos, and instead of searching, they might pop a back row, because that just goes to show how skillful and how prevalent back row was this format compared to right before this ban list. So yeah, Stratos is really important. And then we also play the Disc Commander. Disc Commander, this is the old text. When this card is special summoned from the graveyard, draw 2 cards. So being able to maximize on cards like Premature Burial and Call the Haunted and Destiny Hero Fearmonger, you're able to net a lot of advantage with Disc Commander. And that was the power play of this deck, honestly, was Disc Commander. And the newly limited, semi-limited, is Malicious. We'd still have to play 2 copies of this because it is free tribute fodder for any of our monarchs, because we are playing like a decent sized monarch package and we have quite a few bosses that we can maximize our Malicious off of. But that's the main purpose of this card in this deck, is for tribute fodder or maybe Crush Card Virus. And then, of course, we have to play 2 copies of Destiny Hero Fearmonger. We're wanting to fuel our Disc Commander as fast as possible. So just by searching Destiny Hero Disc Commander off of Stratos and pitching it with Destiny Draw before you search Malicious, that's going to help to fuel the Fearmonger, which is definitely, you ideally want to search Disc Commander first unless you have a lot of Monarchs in hand where you can maximize on Malicious. Now that's really it for the Destiny Hero package. Now on for the other utility cards that this deck played. They did maximize on Breaker, the Magical Warrior. That just goes to show how broken Breaker gets in history. This card is surviving every single format. It is at 1, however, but yeah, Breaker is just so much value, and especially in a skillful format like this where there is prevalent back row, if they're gonna Wing Blast your Breaker, they're just gonna get something broke next turn. So it's like Breaker just adds so much power to this deck. In addition to Breaker, we also play 1 copy of Snipe Hunter. Snipe Hunter also adds its own value to the deck, being able to pitch Malicious from hand or a Treeborn Frog to be able to just probably pop a back row or a face down set monster that could be a Recruiter or a flip effect. Yeah, Snipe Hunter is pretty prevalent this format, and it was newly released as well. And then we do play a singular copy of Mystic Tomato because we are looking for the recursion aspect, and you could summon Snipe Hunter off Mystic Tomato as well. So Mystic Tomato, since the format slowed down a lot from, Diamond Turbo decks and Demise OTK decks, Mystic Tomato just gets more value now because recruiters are going to stick on the board more than they did before. And then we do play 1 copy of Sangan for obvious reasons. We play the Mystic Tomato, and then tying into that, we have to play the Spirit Reaper because this is a relatively controlled deck. So we're looking to control the field and trying to basically just out advantage our opponent. And that is what I call a skillful format, is when you're just playing for card advantage and there's no real way to just OTK for game unless you just draw triple Ryza and have Treeborn. So yeah, Spirit Reaper is quite mandatory, I would say, because it's very easy to just get a direct attack off of this by Wing Blasting their monster. But yeah, and then we do play a singular copy of Magician of Faith. This card is at 1, if I remember correctly. That just goes to show the power of Magician Faith in these eras. Just being able to net back a D-Draw or even a Pot of Avarice that's limited to 1 is just really, really powerful. And the format's slow enough that we can facilitate running Magician of Faith. And then we do play a Card Trooper. Card Trooper is really good just because we can mill our Treeborn Frog or Malicious. Sometimes it can feel bad if you hit a card like Heavy Storm or you're one of Pot of Avarice. I've always felt weird about this card, this format, but it's definitely mandatory because it can get pretty big and can out a lot of problems. And then we do play a singular copy of Morphing Jar. Morphing Jar definitely has its utility this format, especially being a skillful format. It definitely adds a lot of value to the deck, and Morphing Jar generally is better in slower formats as well. And we do play a singular copy of Treeborn Frog. Now Treeborn is probably, other than the Destiny heroes, it's like the heart and soul of this deck because at the end of the day, this is a Monarch strategy. So Treeborn is going to do everything you need it to do. It's going to be good at, tributing for the Monarchs. It comes back every standby phase. You're using your traps relatively quickly so you can bring this back. And yeah, Treeborn just adds so much value because now they're gonna have to deal with this and whatever Monarchs you may summon. But yeah, so that's really it for all the monsters in this deck. Now moving on to the spells and traps. So the spells and traps are really balanced this format, to be quite honest. They only play 2 copies of Destiny Draw, mainly because with Malicious being at 2, we're not running that many targets. The deck isn't overly fast like Diamond Turbo was, so we don't necessarily need to max out on Destiny Draw. And that goes for the same with Reinforcements of the Army. We still need it so we can search our Stratos, plus we can search Fearmonger, or Disc Commander, but we don't really need to max out on it because we don't want dead cards in our hand late game. And then the mandatory staples of this time, Snatch Steal did get banned, as well as Ring of Destruction. So now that they're slowly eliminating all the power cards, we still have to play the ones that still remain, such as Premature Burial. And then for obvious reasons, we have to play Brain Control because we are playing a Monarch strategy. And then of course we play the Heavy Storm and Mystical Space Typhoon. And since the format slowed down quite a bit, and it's definitely a pretty set heavy format because they might be setting a Recruiter, a Magician of Faith, Morphing Jar, whatever the case may be, Spirit Reaper, we do play a Nobleman of Crossout. This card got really better this format just because it slowed down to the point where this deck was really overwhelming at controlling the field. So just being able to just clear their monster immediately and then start your own control recursion, like by maybe setting a Dokoichi, you know, you can definitely out their problems before they out yours. And then we do play the singular copy of Pot of Avarice just because it's basically Pot of Greed in this format. And if you run out of Monarchs, yeah, you can definitely recycle them because it's very common for the mirror matches to last a really long time because this deck doesn't OTK very easy. So mirror matches could easily dwindle down to both players only having maybe like less than 10 cards left in deck, which means you're gonna go through all your Monarchs through the course of the game. Whether or not they deal with them, you know, Pot of Avarice comes up a lot. If we could play 2, we probably would, but it was at 1. And then another mandatory staple of the format, we play Scapegoat. Scapegoat for obvious reasons, because now that the format's slow, this card just gets even better. But tying into the Scapegoat, with it being a slower format, we play a singular copy of Creature Swap. Now, Creature Swap is really good because, you know, we play more Recruiters plus Scapegoat. And giving them Sangan feels really good. Or even a Morphing Jar, and then attacking into the Morphing Jar with their monster. And then you're basically controlling pretty much the board state. And since we do have quite a few discard fodders, we do play a singular copy of Lightning Vortex. So this format, we had to deal with problem cards like Spirit Reaper, or maybe just a big Monarch that we can't get over. Some people opted to play Smashing Ground over Lightning Vortex, but in this particular build, I want to out more than one monster. So I opted to play Lightning Vortex over Smashing Ground. But yeah, so that's a sum of what the spell cards look like. Now, as I said, this format was a lot of these decks, the same decks like mirror matches, give or take a few cards. Lightning Vortex for Smashing Ground is just an example of a small change one might make to differentiate the deck. Now, moving on to the trap lineup, we are playing Treeborn, so we want to keep it small. We play 2 Phoenix Wing Wind Blasts. Now, Wing Blast is really good because it helps us facilitate our Treeborn Frog. We can pitch it, clear this card off the field, and then summon Treeborn in our standby phase. And this also synergizes really well with Ryza. But in addition to that, we still play the power traps that are left in the format. We play the Mirror Force, we play the Torrential Tribute, the Call the Haunted. This card got better because of Destiny Hero Disc Commander. And then if you could afford it at the time, because it was a prize card, you had to play Crush Card Virus. Now, reflecting on the format, we would all play this card, but back in the day, this wasn't easily accessible. So most people had to play without this card. So that's why a lot of the pros back in the day, not only were they really good, but they also had an inherent advantage because a lot of them won a prize card. But yeah, so that really does it for the profile. This deck didn't really use an extra deck as Metamorphosis was banned. And yeah, extra decks weren't really used until right around Teledad format when Synchros got released. So that does it for the profile of Perfect Circle, September of 2007. Stay tuned for the next profile in meta history of Yu-Gi-Oh!